The Family Feud studio buzzed with anticipation on that October afternoon in 2024. Steve Harvey took his position at center stage, prepared to guide another episode through the familiar rhythms of questions, answers, and family competition. The audience settled into their seats, cameras positioned to capture every moment, and two families stood ready at their podiums for what appeared to be a standard taping. However, within the next 30 minutes, something would unfold that would transform this entertainment program into a profound moment of human vulnerability and compassion, leaving Steve Harvey visibly shaken and reminding millions of viewers that addiction hides in plain sight, affecting people from every walk of life. If this is your first time encountering our content, please take a moment to subscribe and engage with this material, because what follows is a deeply important story about struggle, courage, and the first steps toward healing. At the contestant podium stood 33-year-old Michael Anderson from Portland, Oregon. He appeared unremarkable in the way that people struggling with hidden addictions often do, well-groomed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, his smile practiced and appropriate, his demeanor suggesting normalcy. Beside him stood his wife Rebecca, his teenage sister Amanda, his mother Dorothy, and his closest friend from college, Jason. The Anderson family presented themselves as typical middle-class Americans, the kind of family that could be neighbors to anyone watching. What the audience could not perceive was the weight Michael carried beneath his composed exterior, a secret that had been consuming him for years and threatening to destroy everything he valued. Michael worked as a high school English teacher, a profession he had chosen because he genuinely loved literature and believed in the transformative power of education. His colleagues respected him, his students appreciated his engaging teaching style, and his performance evaluations consistently rated him as excellent. He had been married to Rebecca for 9 years, and they had two young sons, ages 6 and 4, who adored their father. From external appearances, Michael's life looked successful and stable. But beneath this carefully maintained facade existed a reality that only his wife fully understood, and even she did not know the complete extent of what he was facing. 3 years earlier, Michael had injured his back while helping a friend move furniture. The pain had been significant enough that his doctor prescribed opioid painkillers to manage it during the acute phase of recovery. Michael had taken the medication as directed initially, finding relief from the physical discomfort that had been interfering with his ability to work and function normally. The injury healed within several weeks, but Michael found himself continuing to request refills of the medication, telling himself and his doctor that he still experienced residual pain that required management. What had begun as legitimate medical treatment had gradually transformed into something else entirely. Over the following months and years, Michael's use of prescription painkillers escalated from occasional pills to daily dependence. He became skilled at obtaining medication through various means, visiting multiple doctors and describing symptoms calibrated to result in prescriptions, purchasing pills from acquaintances who had their own prescriptions, and eventually turning to less legitimate sources when medical channels became more restricted. His tolerance increased, requiring higher doses to achieve the same effect. His entire mental and emotional landscape began to reorganize around securing and using the medication that had become central to his ability to function. Rebecca had discovered the extent of his problem approximately 8 months before their Family Feud appearance. She had found hidden pill bottles in his car, noticed money disappearing from their accounts, observed changes in his behavior and mood that could no longer be explained by work stress or fatigue. The confrontation that followed had been devastating for both of them. Michael had admitted to his addiction with a mixture of shame and relief, acknowledging that the secret he had been carrying was becoming unbearable. They had agreed that he needed treatment, but Michael had been terrified of the professional and social consequences of seeking help openly. His teaching career could be jeopardized. His reputation in their community could be damaged. His family would face judgment and scrutiny. They had attempted to address the problem quietly. Michael had tried to taper his usage independently, had attended a few anonymous support group meetings, had sworn to Rebecca repeatedly that he would stop. But addiction does not yield to willpower alone, and each attempt at self-directed recovery had eventually failed. The stress of maintaining his teaching responsibilities while managing withdrawal symptoms and cravings had proven overwhelming. He would succeed for days or weeks before relapsing, each failure deepening his shame and his conviction that he could not overcome this problem. The Family Feud appearance had been Rebecca's idea, conceived during one of Michael's brief periods of sobriety. She had thought that having something positive to focus on, something that represented hope and normalcy, might help him stay motivated in his recovery efforts. They had applied together, been selected, and scheduled their taping. Michael had managed to remain abstinent for 3 weeks leading up to the show, the longest period of sobriety he had achieved in over a year. But the stress of the impending television appearance, combined with the constant psychological pressure of his addiction, had created a crisis point that would manifest in an unexpected way. The game proceeded through its initial rounds with apparent normalcy. The Anderson family performed adequately, answering questions correctly and engaging with Steve in the customary banter that characterized the show. However, Steve Harvey, whose years of hosting had honed his ability to read people with remarkable accuracy, noticed something about Michael that troubled him. There was a quality to Michael's eyes that suggested distress beneath the surface pleasantness, a tension in his posture that seemed disproportionate to the low-stakes nature of a game show, a disconnect between his verbal responses and his body language that indicated internal conflict. When the Anderson family won their match and advanced to fast money, the usual celebration felt slightly forced. Rebecca went first in the fast money round, answering the 5 questions and scoring 156 points, a strong performance that meant Michael needed only 44 points to secure the $20,000 prize. The mathematics were straightforward, the pressure minimal, success virtually guaranteed. Steve positioned himself at the podium beside Michael, prepared to ask the 5 questions that would likely result in an easy victory. But before Steve could begin the round, Michael raised his hand in a gesture requesting pause. "Mr. Harvey," Michael said, his voice unsteady despite his attempt at composure, "I need to say something before we continue. I need to tell you something that I should have told people a long time ago." Steve's expression shifted from game show host to concerned human being, a transformation those familiar with his work had witnessed before when contestants revealed unexpected truths. "All right," Steve responded carefully, giving Michael his complete attention. "What do you need to say?" Michael took a breath that seemed to require conscious effort, and when he spoke, his words emerged with the quality of someone releasing a burden that had become unbearable to carry alone. "I am a prescription drug addict. For the past 3 years, I have been addicted to opioid painkillers. I have been lying to my wife, my family, my employer, and myself about the extent of my problem. I have been hiding pills, stealing money, and destroying the trust of everyone who loves me, and I cannot do this anymore. I cannot continue pretending that everything is fine when I am falling apart." The studio fell into profound silence. Steve Harvey's face registered shock, concern, and deep sadness in rapid succession. His characteristic confidence and humor vanished, replaced by visible heartbreak for the young man standing before him in obvious distress. Rebecca, standing with the rest of the family, had tears streaming down her face, her expression a complex mixture of relief that the secret was finally public and fear about what would come next. Michael's mother Dorothy looked devastated, her hand covering her mouth in shock. The audience sat motionless, recognizing they were witnessing something far beyond normal game show territory. Steve walked closer to Michael, his voice gentle when he finally spoke. "Michael, I appreciate your honesty. I know that took tremendous courage, but I need to ask, are you all right now? Are you safe?" Michael nodded, though tears had begun falling. "I am safe right now. I am not currently under the influence of anything. I have been trying to stay clean for this appearance. But the stress of being here, of maintaining this facade of normalcy, it made me realize that I cannot keep doing this. I cannot keep pretending. I need help. Real help, professional help. And I am terrified of what that means for my career, my family, my life. But I am more terrified of what happens if I continue down this path." Steve's response revealed the depth of his compassion and his understanding that this moment required careful handling. "Michael, first, I want you to know that what you just did, being honest about your struggle in front of all these people, that takes more strength than most people will ever have to demonstrate. Addiction is a disease. It is not a moral failing. It is not weakness. It is a medical condition that requires treatment, just like diabetes or heart disease or any other health problem." The audience began applauding softly, affirming Steve's words and showing support for Michael's vulnerability. Steve continued, his voice carrying conviction. You said you are terrified about what getting help means for your career and your life, but I want you to consider what not getting help means. Where does this path lead if you continue on it without treatment? Michael's response was immediate and raw. It leads to losing my family, losing my job, losing my life probably. I know the statistics. I know that people die from this every day. I know that I am one bad decision away from becoming one of those statistics. That is why I had to say something. I thought I could handle this quietly, manage it on my own, avoid the consequences of admitting the truth. But I cannot. I have tried and failed so many times. I need intervention that I cannot provide for myself. Steve turned to Rebecca, who had moved closer during this exchange. Rebecca, did you know Michael was planning to share this today? Rebecca shook her head, her voice breaking as she responded. No, we have been dealing with this privately for months. We have been trying to figure out how to get him help without destroying everything we have built. But it has been impossible. The shame and fear have kept us paralyzed. I am relieved that he said something, even though I am terrified about what comes next. Steve addressed them both with remarkable wisdom and empathy. Listen to me carefully. The shame and stigma around addiction, that is one of the biggest obstacles to people getting the help they need. People suffer in silence because they are afraid of judgment, afraid of professional consequences, afraid of being seen as weak or flawed. But silence kills people. Secrets kill people. What Michael just did, speaking this truth out loud, that is the first real step toward recovery. He paused, ensuring his next words would land with appropriate weight. Michael, you are a teacher. You work with young people every day. Some of those students are probably watching adults in their own lives struggle with addiction. Some of them might develop substance abuse problems themselves in the future. By being honest about your struggle, by showing that asking for help is strength rather than weakness, you are teaching a lesson more valuable than anything in your curriculum. Michael broke down completely at these words, sobbing openly. Steve put a supportive hand on his shoulder, allowing him the space to release the emotions he had been suppressing for years. The audience remained respectfully quiet, understanding they were witnessing something sacred, a human being reaching the end of his capacity to carry a burden alone and finally asking for help. When Michael regained some composure, Steve made a decision that would change the trajectory of this story. Here is what we are going to do. We are going to pause this game. The money does not matter right now. What matters is getting you connected with resources that can help. I have contacts with treatment facilities and addiction specialists. We are going to make some calls and get you into a program that can provide the intensive support you need. Steve turned to address the cameras directly, using his platform to educate and destigmatize. Ladies and gentlemen, addiction is a crisis in this country. It affects people from every background, every profession, every community. It does not discriminate. And one of the reasons it continues to devastate so many lives is because people are afraid to admit they need help. They are afraid of losing their jobs, their families, their standing in their communities. But I want everyone watching to understand something crucial. Addiction is treatable, recovery is possible, but it requires honesty, professional intervention, and support. It requires what Michael just demonstrated, the courage to stop hiding and start healing. What followed was an unprecedented departure from standard game show protocol. The producers, recognizing the significance of what was occurring, agreed to extend the taping. Steve brought addiction specialists onto the stage via video conference, connecting Michael with medical professionals who could provide immediate guidance and support. They discussed treatment options, explaining the process of medical detoxification, residential rehabilitation programs, outpatient therapy, medication-assisted treatment, and long-term recovery support. They addressed Michael's concerns about his teaching career, explaining that many professions had protocols for employees seeking treatment for addiction, often protecting their positions while they engaged in recovery. Rebecca participated fully in these conversations, asking questions about family therapy, support for loved ones of people in recovery, and how to rebuild trust that had been damaged by years of deception and addiction. Michael's mother Dorothy spoke about her feelings of guilt, wondering how she had failed to notice her son's struggle. The specialists gently corrected this thinking, explaining that people with addiction often become extremely skilled at hiding their substance use, and that family members should not blame themselves for failing to detect what was deliberately concealed. The education provided during this extended segment addressed the neurological basis of addiction, explaining how substances like opioids alter brain chemistry and create physical dependence that cannot be overcome through willpower alone. They discuss the particular dangers of prescription drug addiction, noting how it often begins with legitimate medical treatment and gradually transforms into something more serious. They emphasized that seeking treatment was not admission of weakness, but recognition of reality and commitment to health. After approximately 45 minutes of conversation, resources had been identified and arrangements had been made. A treatment facility specializing in addiction recovery for professionals had agreed to admit Michael within 48 hours. His school district's employee assistance program had been contacted and had confirmed that seeking treatment would not automatically result in termination, particularly given his proactive approach to addressing the problem. A family therapist had been identified to work with Rebecca and their children during and after Michael's treatment. The immediate crisis had been transformed into a structured path forward. Steve then returned to the question of the game itself. Michael, we still have fast money to complete, but I want to be clear that whether you answer these questions or not, whether you win the money or not, you have already won something more important today. You have won honesty. You have won the first real chance at recovery. The $20,000 would be helpful, I am sure, but it is not what matters most here. Michael, exhausted but appearing lighter somehow, responded with gratitude. I would like to try to finish if that is all right. My wife earned those points. I would like to honor her effort. Steve agreed, and they proceeded with the fast money round. Remarkably, Michael answered the 5 questions with focus and clarity, as though the act of confession had freed mental and emotional resources previously consumed by maintaining secrecy. When the answers were revealed, Michael had scored 78 points on his own, bringing the family total to 234 points, well exceeding the 200 required for victory. The audience applauded, but the celebration felt different from typical game show victories, more meaningful and hard-won. Steve made an announcement that deviated from standard protocol. The Anderson family has won $20,000. That money is yours. But I am going to add an additional $20,000 from my foundation to help cover the costs of treatment and therapy for your family. Addiction recovery is expensive, and I do not want financial barriers to prevent you from getting the help you need. The gesture brought fresh tears from Michael and Rebecca, and the audience responded with a standing ovation. The episode that aired 6 weeks later included extensive content warnings and resources for viewers struggling with addiction or concerned about loved ones. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the clip had been shared millions of times across social platforms. Addiction treatment facilities reported surges in calls from people seeking help, many specifically mentioning that Michael's courage in speaking publicly had inspired them to reach out. Employee assistance programs at companies across the country reported increased utilization as people felt safer acknowledging their struggles. The broader conversations sparked by Michael's revelation addressed the intersection of addiction and professional life, particularly in fields like education, where moral standards and public trust created additional barriers to seeking help. Teachers, healthcare workers, lawyers, and others in positions of responsibility shared their own stories of struggling with addiction while terrified to seek treatment due to professional consequences. The dialogue helped shift cultural understanding toward viewing addiction as a health issue requiring medical intervention rather than a character flaw requiring punishment. Michael entered residential treatment 3 days after the Family Feud taping. The intensive program lasted 90 days, during which he participated in individual therapy, group counseling, medical management of withdrawal and cravings, and education about the disease of addiction and strategies for long-term recovery. Rebecca attended family therapy sessions, working through the complex emotions of betrayal, fear, hope, and love that characterized her experience of Michael's addiction. Their young sons received age-appropriate counseling to help them understand what was happening in their family. Michael's school district, informed of his situation and his proactive pursuit of treatment, placed him on medical leave rather than terminating his employment. His colleagues, many of whom were shocked to learn of his struggle, rallied to support rather than condemn him. Some shared their own experiences with addiction affecting their families, creating connections Michael had not known existed. The community response was predominantly compassionate, with occasional judgment from those who could not understand addiction as disease rather than choice. 6 months after completing residential treatment, Michael returned to Steve Harvey's show for a follow-up interview. The transformation was visible and profound. While he still carried the weight of someone who understood the ongoing nature of recovery, there was also a lightness and authenticity to his presence that had been absent during the original appearance. He spoke honestly about his journey through treatment, the difficulty of early recovery, the ongoing work of maintaining sobriety, and the relationships that had been damaged and were slowly being rebuilt. Michael shared that he attended support group meetings daily, worked with a sponsor who provided guidance and accountability, and had developed a comprehensive relapse prevention plan. He had returned to teaching with renewed purpose, using his experience to connect with students in ways that felt more authentic and meaningful. He had become an advocate for addiction awareness and treatment access, speaking at community events and working with organizations focused on supporting people in recovery. Rebecca appeared alongside him, discussing her own healing process and the work of rebuilding trust in their marriage. She spoke candidly about the anger and hurt she had experienced, the fear that had accompanied Michael's early recovery, and the gradual emergence of hope as he demonstrated consistent commitment to his sobriety. Their relationship remained a work in progress, she explained, but it was progress grounded in honesty rather than deception. Interview concluded with Michael offering advice to others struggling with addiction. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to ask for help. That moment will never come. There will always be reasons to delay, consequences to fear, shame to overcome. But those barriers become insurmountable if you allow them to prevent you from seeking treatment. I thought admitting my addiction would destroy my life. Instead, it saved my life. Recovery is hard, probably the hardest thing I have ever done, but it is possible. And life in recovery, even with its challenges, is infinitely better than life in active addiction. Steve Harvey reflected on the impact of Michael's original appearance, sharing that it had been one of the most significant moments in his television career. When Michael spoke his truth that day, he did something brave that helped thousands of other people find their own courage to seek help. I have received countless messages from viewers saying that watching him admit his struggle gave them permission to admit their own. That is the power of honesty. That is the power of vulnerability. Michael did not just save himself that day. He helped save other people too. As this profound story reaches its conclusion, several crucial lessons merit consideration. Michael's decision to reveal his addiction publicly, while risky and frightening, ultimately created opportunities for healing that years of private struggle had not produced. His vulnerability gave permission to others to acknowledge their own battles with substance abuse. His willingness to seek help challenged stigma and demonstrated that addiction can affect anyone, including respected professionals and devoted family members. The story also illustrates the critical importance of compassionate response to addiction disclosure. Steve Harvey's reaction, characterized by empathy rather than judgment, support rather than condemnation, created space for constructive next steps rather than defensiveness or shame. His use of his platform to educate about addiction as disease rather than moral failing helped shift cultural understanding in ways that save lives. If this account has resonated with you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please engage with this content and subscribe to our channel. These stories of human struggle and recovery matter profoundly. They remind us that addiction hides behind seemingly normal lives, that asking for help represents strength rather than weakness, and that recovery, while difficult, remains possible with appropriate support and treatment. Michael Anderson's appearance on Family Feud will be remembered not as entertainment, but as a watershed moment when one person's courage to speak truth created ripples of hope for countless others fighting similar battles in silence. His journey continues, one day at a time, proving that the path to recovery begins with a single step, the step of honesty.